Well, as you take a seat, good morning. If you are new to Grace, if you're visiting, we're glad to have you here. Welcome. And if we have not met, my name is Zane Gunter. I'm actually the college coordinator over at Southwood, and so I'm one of the Southwood people who's migrated over this morning. And so thank you to Anderson for being hospitable to us. It really is a joy. I got this privilege last year. I guess I'm the after Christmas guy. Anderson came and joined us at Southwood, but I really do count it a privilege that I get to see just a fuller picture of what it means to be one church and one body here in Bryan College Station, and so I'm very grateful for that. But yes, with the holiday season wrapping up, one of my favorite things that I love about it is really just the classic films that we get to watch, the classic Christmas films. I think that bring a lot of nostalgia to me. Of course, you have the classics. You have Miracle on 34th Street, It's a Wonderful Life, White Christmas. You kind of have these newer classics. You have Home Alone and Elf and National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Those are just like must-watches for me and my family. And it just got me thinking about other classic films, specifically, oddly enough, Karate Kid. And I'm not making a case that it should be a Christmas movie like Die Hard is. I'm not making that case. But if you're not familiar with the 1984 version of Karate Kid, the real one, a real classic, there's a young guy named Danny LaRusso, and he moves basically from the East Coast to the West Coast, and he gets bullied by these young guys, his peers, who are karate students at the Cobra Kai dojo, basically. And so in one of these instances where he is being bullied, there is this man who, his name is Mr. Miyagi. He's a maintenance worker, but he's also somehow some karate master or sensei, whatever you might call it. And he saves Danny from the bullies. He defeats the bullies in this moment. And Danny is just like, whoa, that was awesome. And whatever that was, Mr. Miyagi, I want to learn how to do that. Will you teach me? And eventually Mr. Miyagi says, yes, I'll teach you. And so Danny is ready. And rather than doing what Danny might expect, or what me might expect, and teaching him the moves that he did to basically just deal with these bullies, he said, hey, how about you paint my fence? How about you sand my floors, my walkways, my decks? How about you wax my car? And Danny's, like most of us, he's frustrated. He's like, what is this? This is the cool thing that you taught me how to do. I want to learn how to do that thing. And so eventually Danny learns later on down the road when he gets entered into this karate competition that those seemingly small and simple and mundane things that Mr. Miyagi was teaching him, that actually was the big work that was preparing him to do karate, to do the thing that he wanted to do all along. And the reason I bring something up like that is because as Christians, if you are a believer in Jesus, our lives follow a similar plot line, a similar storyline, that we've experienced God's saving work. We've been redeemed. We've been purchased from slavery to sin and to death, and we have been justified. We've been set in a right relationship before God. And I believe that if you're a believer in Jesus, you rightly want to respond to that and say, God, I want to live faithfully. I want to serve you. I want to do great things with you and for you that bring glory to your name. I want to live a life that's faithful to you. And especially each new year, we want to often redevote ourselves because, throughout the course of the year, we're tired. Maybe some rhythms fell to the wayside or unexpected life things happened. Life just got hard. And some of the great zeal and fervor that we had of doing great things with God and for God has disappeared. And so with the new year, we have new ambitions and desires and rhythms we want to set in place to respond to God's work in our lives. And if you went to church camp growing up, you knew there was a final night where there was usually extended worship and prayer, and there was an altar call. And every year, if you were like me, you'd go up to the stage and say, I want to commit to God and to all you and to myself that when I go home, I'm never sinning again. I'm done with it. I promise. That was church camp for me growing up. And now we have ambitions that we want to read the Bible this year. Tara Lee Cobble is going to be playing in all of our cars in a couple of days. And it's a great goal. Or we want to be more generous with our finances, more hospitable with people into our home. Or we want to finally start or join a Bible study or a community group. We want to seek accountability. We want to practice confession. And these are all great goals, well-intended goals. And I hope that many of the desires and ambitions that you have for this new year are in line with these things. that we want to do great things. We want to work with God as he works in us. But I also want to put something else before you to consider that maybe you wouldn't expect. Maybe it hasn't made your list of spiritual rhythms or family habits or goals for this next year. And here it is. Practice not complaining. Practice not complaining. And it's super anticlimactic. I probably put you up on a cliffhanger. I've built it up to this point. It's not something that's flashy. It's not going to get you comments and shares on social media where people are like, wow, love that. Love that for you. I'm going to do that. Retweet, amen. It might not be a very flashy thing, but I do believe that similar to what Mr. Miyagi had Danny do, this could be a really small thing that actually has really great implications, not only on our own spiritual lives, but for our families, for our workplaces, for our community groups, really for our city. It could be a small thing that has a great change in the lives of those around us. And I think we would do well to consider how often we complain, what we complain about, who we complain to, and perhaps how they could be something that's really significant, because it's one of the things that we'll do that will be very drastic and different and shocking to those around us, especially those who aren't believers. I can almost guarantee that as you go back to work this week, or you just go back and you see friends in community, a lot of your initial conversations will be, hey guys, how was your break? How was the holidays for you guys? It's like, oh, good. But man, we're so glad to be home. We were with my family for way too long. 2 days is too much. You get 24 hours, that's it. And my kids have driven me crazy. I think I'm just gonna sell all their presents now, and we're just gonna be done. But it was good though. And so we start off already with complaining. The first words that we're gonna say to a stranger, first words we're gonna say to even some of our closest friends are just words of complaint, of grumbling, of frustration. And if this is you, I'm not judging you, because this was me even yesterday. As we got home, our neighbor helped feed our animals and get our mail, and she was like, how are you guys? And we're like, ready to be home and done. And I was honest, but it wasn't very pleasant. I didn't really ask her how she was doing. But I think we live in a culture where complaining is a way to break the ice. It's a way that we relate to people, whether they're the barista or whether they're a coworker or just an acquaintance or even a close friend. And if we look at people in a way that if they don't complain in a conversation, it's like, oh, they must think they're goody two-shoes. They're being fake. They're being inauthentic, because I know that their life isn't all shiny and good. There must be something bad. Just tell me. Tell me so I can complain back to you. That's kind of the culture that we live in. But what if not complaining is not about a lack of authenticity, but rather it's about we just want to be bright and shining lights in a world that is just full of darkness and hope and pessimism and just not joy. And so today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what it looks like to not complain. And for the passage we're going to be in, we're going to look at Philippians 2, starting in verse 12. And so if you have your copy of the scriptures, you can flip open to Philippians chapter 2. We'll be in verse 12, and we'll go all the way to 18. And it's really going to talk about how we as Christians can shine in this world and be examples to those around us. And as we read, Paul is going to tell us really three things, kind of the outline of what it's going to look like. He's going to say, here's what you need to do. You need to work out your salvation. You need to work with God as he's working in you, trying to sanctify you, make you look more like his son. And how you're going to do that is without grumbling, without complaining. And ultimately, the result is going to be what we just said, that we're going to be lights, shining lights in a dark world that desperately needs it. And so that's where we're going to be today. So if you'll join me, we're going to read verse 12. It says this, so then, my dear friends, just as you've always obeyed, not only in my presence, but even more in my absence, continue working out your salvation with awe and reverence. And so Paul begins this section with a so that or therefore, depending on your translation. And these are conjunction words. More specifically, they are logical inferences, which if you're not an English major like myself, it's basically saying that these are connecting words that are a logical conclusion or a summary of what was just said. And so what was just said, it's a very well-known passage, Philippians 2, 1 through 11. It's this beautiful poem, this imagery that Paul writes of Christ's humility, his obedience to God the Father, even to the point of death on a cross, which leads to his glorification. So Christ's humiliation in his obedience leads to his glorification. And so essentially Paul is saying, as Christ obeyed God the Father, so should you. You should be obedient to God the Father. But then it begs us to ask, well, what are we called to be obedient to? How should I be obedient? And he says you should work out your salvation by working out your salvation. And this is always a tricky verse. I feel like I've heard this verse talked about even growing up, and I was always stumbled on this. Like, what does this mean, Paul? Like, I know there's these things about, working out my salvation. Is this a works-based salvation, or what is this? What is this? And so I think it's important for us to also note that Paul's verbiage is work out your salvation, not work for your salvation. So it's not a matter of do this and you'll be saved, but it's a working out of your salvation. But before we even get to what this means, I want to practice just a good Bible study tool, and it's really looking at a word and seeing what it means in its context, because context matters for words. Words can mean different things in different contexts. For instance, dog. Dog can mean canine, like your pet that you have in your homes. Dog can mean like your homie, your friend, or it can mean someone who's got some motivation or some energy or some dedication, like Cassius Howell is a dog. You describe that for someone who just has like this aggressiveness about them to accomplish something. Or dogs they can be slang for your stinky feet, so a lot of different uses. Or another one, let's be on time today. That can mean let's arrive before church begins. Or it can mean let's arrive approximately around when it begins, like maybe into the first song a little bit, or just whenever we can get there. Or it can be very on the nose, and it can mean, usually for me, it's you better not be the reason that we're late again today. That's what it can mean to say, let's be on time today. And so we have to define our terms. What do words mean in their context? And so we see a word used a lot like this, salvation. And we tend to think of the work of being redeemed, of being justified, made right before God. But really, salvation can also mean Jesus saved Peter from drowning. Salvation can mean that as well. So in this instance, salvation is referring to a judgment that's going to take place in a final day that will result in believers being fully sanctified, and therefore they'll be glorified. And so salvation in this sense is talking about not just the one-time event of being justified and being saved. That's a once and for all, happened one time and it is set in stone. That is a one-time event. But salvation in this context is talking about the full breadth of even afterwards. What does it look like across your life to be sanctified, to look more like Christ that will eventually result in your glorification? And so, for instance, salvation is a gift that we take responsibility for, and we learn to enjoy it and to experience it and explore it for a lifetime. Just like those of you who are married. Whenever you got married, it was this large event that happened on one day, but it was just one event that you're going to take the rest of your lifetime to experience and explore and enjoy and figure it out and work at it. It requires work. Marriage requires work. And so essentially Paul is saying, work out, or even better, work at it. Work at your sanctification for the rest of your life. That's what it means to be a Christian, to constantly work at sanctification for the rest of your life. Which leads us to our first point of what does Paul say he wants the Philippian church to do, and also us as well. He wants us to work with God as God works within us. And the reason this is so important is because Paul can't be with the Philippians to do this work or to help complete this sanctification work within them. At the time that Paul is writing this to the Philippians, he's in a Roman prison. He's locked up. There's no way that he can go visit this Philippian church as much as he wants to. And he's also very aware of the reality of, I may never make it back to you. I may never get to be in your presence. I may never get to see you face to face, even though I love you dearly. I can't complete this work in you or even help you as much as I would like to. If that's the case, the Philippians have to make their faith their own. They have to, quote unquote, take the reins of their faith so that they can reach a full maturity in Christ. And so for me and my wife, we have a 2-year-old son named Briar and a 3-month-old daughter named Steely. And it's been fun with our daughter getting to re-experience a lot of the newborn things that maybe I didn't forget them, but I'm just like, oh yes, this is a thing. And one of those things being tummy time. My 3-month-old daughter cannot support her head like my 2-year-old does, because he's got a 40-pound noggin up here, so he had to support his neck or his head. But so we had to practice this thing called tummy time. And so in order for our daughter, or any baby really, to develop the muscles in their neck and their back needed to support your head, you have to lay them on their stomach, and they have to do this little arch thing so that they can basically support their head. And they're content for a moment, they're really cute for a moment, but then they get really angry. because it's really uncomfortable to exercise those muscles and they get tired. But it's a necessary thing to do. In fact, I would be unkind if I didn't practice tummy time with my daughter. Well, I don't practice it. Maybe I should. But if I didn't have my daughter do tummy time, because she wouldn't be fully developed. She'd be like this. I'd have to constantly support her against my head as much as I would love to do this for the rest of my life and protect her. I can't do that. She has to support herself at some point. And I think for many of us, I'm going to coin this term maybe, we need to practice a sort of a spiritual tummy time, of something that's really uncomfortable, but something that we have to do on our own. So we have to be set down and do something that's painful, but it's for our own good, it's for our own growth, because there's some of us who, we go to the same church that our dad went to because that's where he went, but I really don't know what this church believes or what they stand for, and I'm not really a member, I don't really participate, I kind of attend, and I just do this church thing because that's what I was told to do. Or I pray the same prayers that my mom prayed because they worked for her, and she's a saint, and they're gonna work for me. But it's not really a rich and vibrant and growing prayer life like a relationship is, like you would have a conversation with your spouse. And there's many of us as well, and I've been guilty of this, that I rely on the 3 points of a sermon to tell me how to live that week. Or I rely on the insights of a discipler or a Bible study leader to determine, like, this is the truth. This is what 1 Peter means. This is the absolute truth, and I'm gonna trust my Bible study leader. Or we rely on the prayers of our spouse or our friends to support our spiritual life. We say their prayers are gonna be the things that sustain my own spiritual life. And there comes a moment whenever all of us have to make a decision and say, I need to work with God myself as he works in me, and there's no one else who can do it for me but myself. And so you have to make a choice to join a church, to show up and be a contributing member to a Bible study, to set aside time to pray and to practice gratitude with yourself and your family, to learn how to read the Bible and to study it consistently in the context of a community. You need to know the gospel and how to communicate it to others, to give a reason for the faith that you have. Or you need to invite friends and strangers over to your house so that you can practice hospitality. And yet, even though it is our responsibility, know that God hasn't abandoned you to do this work alone. It's not all a thing that you have to do by yourself. We work with God as he works in us, as it says in Philippians, with fear and trembling. Meaning that we rely on God and his strength to complete this work that he began in us. And we are filled with fear and trembling, or reverence and respect for God. And we, as a result, we humble ourselves before him. And we acknowledge a few key things, that we serve a holy and powerful and loving God. But we also have a really wise and powerful and lying enemy who is constantly working against us in our sanctification. And third, we have to realize that we are often willing to work with God, but we are weak and unable to do so. So we depend on God for all that we need as we want to work with him. And when we acknowledge these 3 things, we can be comforted by the truth that God is bringing forth, or as it says, working in us, both the desire and the effort to do what he pleases. Many times that I have the desire to do what is right, but I lack the energy or the ability. I want to go to the gym. I want to be in better shape, but I'd rather sleep. I want that more. Or I want to read my Bible in the early mornings or late at night, but man, I really also want to catch up on the TV shows that I like, or read another book that I really, really enjoy. And so I have the desire, but I lack the energy or the ability. Or there are even times where we don't seem to even want to do the right thing. We know what the right thing to do is, but we just simply don't even want to do that. And it's in these times I think we can really practice humility and say, God, will you give me the desire to do what is right? Will you place it in my heart? Will you motivate me to say yes to you, yes to the things that you desire me to do, yes to serving others? Will you enable me to do what needs to be done so that I can glorify you, so I can enjoy this rich life, this life to the full that you promise? And so for today, how will each of us begin to work with God as he works in us? I think a lot of places to begin to continue with humility is just confess the ways that you haven't had the desire to own your faith. Be honest and real with God about a lack of zeal, a lack of desire, and know that there's no judgment for that. Confess the ways that you've tried so hard to sanctify yourself. I know that there's those of us in this room who say, man, I've done everything and I'm motivated. I've got I'm very disciplined to do it. But I think it's okay whenever we fail to say, God, I'm weak and I need you to work in me even more powerfully today. And even ask God, give me the desire, give me the ability to work with you. Give me both the desire and the ability. And then I think it'd also be helpful, and I'm sure many of you have thought through this, of picking maybe just one spiritual discipline to begin with. We can't just root out the things in our life that we don't want to do and hope that good things will grow. We have to remove certain things and replace them with positive, healthy habits. And there's a couple ways to think about spiritual disciplines. There's things that we can do. There's addition. So this is prayer, scripture study or meditation, memorization, serving others, practicing generosity, evangelism, worship, or even just being in community. Those are all spiritual practices that we get to do. There's also practices of subtraction and taking away, and this is often what I need to humble myself, because I tend to err on the side of I'm going to charge up that hill and sanctify myself on my own power and own will and desire. And so I think it's helpful for us to practice disciplines of subtraction, like fasting from food or abstaining from media or things of that sort, or sitting in silence and solitude early in the morning where I'm not hearing affirmation from other people. I'm not just looking for other people's energy to feed off of. I'm just there with God. Or even simplicity. Maybe all the money that we got that we're looking to spend with on clothes and things to furnish our house with, we can say, well, I don't need it. Maybe I can use that to be generous towards someone. And so what spiritual practice will you practice today to work with God as he works in you? And Paul also gives one more tip on how we can work with him. And he says this in verse 14. He says, do everything without grumbling or arguing. Do everything without grumbling or arguing. And again, this feels really anticlimactic. It doesn't really seem like the great thing that how you respond to Paul saying, hey, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Okay, God, I want to work with you. What would you have me do? Don't complain. I was looking for more like a super holy 7-step process that would kind of get me to where I want to be. You know, that's a lot easier for our American step-by-step process brains to follow. But rather than a list of things to do, Paul says there's something you shouldn't do. You shouldn't grumble. You shouldn't argue. And basically what he's saying with this is he's saying grumble, there's two different words he uses, grumble and argue. Grumble is almost an inward attitude, a bad attitude expressed by complaining. So it kind of starts within, and then that kind of can even reach further outwards. We can lead to arguing, a dispute between me and someone else. And so why is it that Paul would give this instruction when he's talking about their sanctification? And I can think of a few reasons. First, what does grumbling, complaining, do to your own heart? What does it do to your sanctification? Does it reflect the character of Christ? And for me, it hardens my heart, and it does not reflect Christ's character. I can very quickly go from God, make me a patient person, to God, why are you testing my patience? Like, this would be so much easier if my kids would do the things I wanted them to do, or my wife would respond how I wanted her to respond. And then now I end up just turning around because I'm upset, I'm grumbling, I have a bad attitude. I turn to my wife and I just want to talk about how our kids are behaving poorly and how their kids are doing better and the things I wish we talked about more so that we could discipline our kids in a better way. And so all sense of peace and patience and calm in my home just disappears because I've grumbled. And it does not help my sanctification. And second, think about what does grumbling or complaining do to those around you? How does complaining affect the sanctification of your family, of your spouse, of your kiddos, of the people in your community? Picking up my example, it makes the people around me hardened and angry too. When I complain to my wife, Kelsey, not only is the joy and the peace and patience being sapped from me, but I'm sapping that out of her. Now, any sense of desire that she had to want to work with me to restore peace to our home, she's like, I don't really want to work with you. You're kind of you're being complaining and negative and rude. And now not only am I upset, she's upset. And so again, it's not contributing to my own sanctification, but also to that of those around me. As you can tell, not only does grumbling lead again, to a lack of my sanctification, but that of others. And if the end goal, the desire of God in our families, our communities is unity, then not complaining is really this linchpin that's going to lead us to greater unity when we don't complain. And I also want to keep in mind that the goal here is not simply, hey, stop complaining. Just don't complain, cut it out. That's not my end goal here, but really it's to become the kind of person that doesn't complain. It's not about the things that you do, but rather a state of being. The goal is to become someone that is so filled with the love of God and with the neighbor and of love of neighbor that you fight against complaining and you want to fight for communion or common unity with those around you. So it's not just about, hey, cut it out, quit doing the things you're doing, but rather let's become someone who believes that the greatest thing I can do is love God and love people. And one way I can do that is by not complaining. So I want to become a person of gratitude, of patience, and of peace. And I've learned, I'm sure I could use countless examples of how children are tests of our sanctification, and they're great, and that's not fair to them. But also, I learned in college that group projects were like my greatest test of sanctification. We did so many group projects. I was like, this doesn't really make sense to me. As if the discussion boards and the papers and the assignments and the exams were not enough. Now you're gonna make me collaborate with a lot of my peers that I don't know, and I will probably never meet again. And so I already went in with a very bad attitude of I don't want to do this thing. And so from that bad attitude brought forth arguing. And these people that I really didn't even know, we began arguing with each other, arguing about when we say we'd meet up, because we're only available at 6 a.m. or 11 p.m. We argued about where we'd meet and who would bring the supplies and who was gonna be the scribe. And I don't wanna be the scribe. I wanna be the person who talks and you just write down what I do. And we also argue over who said they're gonna submit the assignment to Canvas. And so ultimately, the only thing that came out of group projects for me was a lower than desired grade, an email to my professor justifying that I did my part, and I vowed to myself, I will never do a group project again. I will find an exemption somehow. And so that was just a great test of my own sanctification. And I'm sure many of you laugh because you have similar experiences, that you've been on a team or in a group where people complain about their playing time or their role or their lack of a role, their participation, the teacher, the coaches, the boss. You've had an awful attitude about a project at work that it seems to be dumped on you rather than given to you and delegated. Or you've done the Christian complaining that we call venting to a friend about a boss or a spouse or someone who drives you crazy in your community, and you've probably dumped your emotions on a poor college girl who is the barista standing outside at Dunkin' or Dutch Bros. And you're like, well, she's smiling and she seems nice, and so I'm sure that she would listen to me and validate my feelings. You know, we've probably all been there at some point. But what if instead of complaining or arguing or venting, we chose to be the person that we see good in situations? We seek it out, and we are quick to dish out compliments or even just speak words that are positive, that are life-giving and upbringing to people. Or you choose to diligently do your work on the project and graciously accept whatever or whomever is given to you for that project. Or you choose to pray for your boss or the people in your community rather than choose to complain about them. And I'll also say this, there's a time and a place to express frustrations. I hope you don't hear from all this like, oh man, I can never be honest about how I feel. I think that would actually be the opposite of what Paul would want, is for you to bottle it up and become this person who is always bitter and angry and fuming, and just the right thing will set you off. I don't think Paul is advocating for that at all, but I think that we should be mindful of there's a right place and a time and right people that we do share our frustrations with. First, I think if possible, you should try to overlook something that frustrates you. Proverbs 19:11 teaches us that it is to one's glory or one's virtue to overlook an offense. And so if you can overlook something that someone says or something does and you can get away without complaining, that would be to your glory. That would be virtuous of you to do that. But I also understand there are some things that are said, that are done, that you witness, that you're like, man, this is just eating me up. And it's what I think about in the car when I'm driving home, or it's what I think about when I'm eating lunch, or I'm trying to go to bed, and I need to talk about this with someone. And of course, I think that the best thing to do in those instances are to go to those people and say there's been a grievance. But I also think there's wisdom to invite some very close, very, very close, trusted people into your life and invite them to correct you or call you out if they think you're wrong or you're not being valid. I think it's even wise to be human and say, hey, trusted people in my life, I have this grievance and I just need to share it with you. I need to get it off my chest. And so I would appreciate if you would pause and just listen. Just hear me out. Don't give me advice. Just listen to me. But after I'm done, would you please lovingly, kindly, truthfully tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm being unreasonable, if this is ridiculous? I think there's great value. The faithful are the wounds of a friend. And so again, that's why I think it matters to have close and trusted friends who can speak into your life. I have two really close friends of mine that I feel like can very much do this. And I specifically asked them to form this group of guys because I love them and they're great guys, but two, because I know that they're straight shooters and they will challenge me to do the things that I often don't want to do. And I've had to have conversations with people that I did not want to have because these guys told me, you need to go do this and you actually need to go do it within this time frame. And if not, then we're going to follow up and have a conversation. And so I don't want you to hear you can ever express a grievance. You just have to keep it shut. Then you can, vent them in your brain, but just be mindful. You don't have to share it with the poor barista. You don't need to do it to be funny or to connect in a social setting with coworkers or friends or neighbors or family. Save that for a time with people who love you and know you and will validate you, but they'll also correct you and tell you when you're being wrong or unreasonable. And so we want to be a community together that works with God as he works in us. And the way we do this, again, is by not complaining, not grumbling, not being whiny people. And the reason this is so important, which we've already alluded to a little bit, is that we want to do what verse 15 says. So we're going to read verse 15. Going back to verse 14 a little bit, he says, do everything without grumbling or arguing so that there's a purpose, a reason. You may be blameless and pure, children of God without blemish, though you live in a crooked and perverse society, in which you shine as lights in the world. So verse 15, again, it begins with the so that. It's for this purpose, to be blameless and pure. And again, blameless, it means above reproach. And to be pure means to be innocent. So essentially, Paul is saying, don't complain so that you can progress in spiritual maturity, in Christ's likeness. And this matters so much because by being blameless and pure, even in a culture that is not always blameless and pure, it ensures that no one has a reason from culture to pass a critical verdict on you or other Christians or the church. It can be said that being blameless and pure makes sure that your behavior is above criticism. And Paul talks about this earlier in Philippians 1:27. This is what it means to live in a manner worthy of the gospel. It's to be someone who's above criticism, that no one outside the church can speak ill of you. And so when we're people that we're above criticism, we do two things. We shine as lights and we worship God and we witness to others by being these lights. Starting off with worshiping God. It says this in verse 16 through 18. By holding on to the word of life, so that on the day of Christ, I, Paul, will have a reason to boast that I did not run in vain nor labor in vain. But even if I'm being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service of your faith, I am glad and rejoice together with all of you. And in the same way, you should also be glad and rejoice together with me. And so yes, Paul is talking about boasting, but he's not saying this in a way to brag about like, oh yes, I'm the best of the apostles and the best discipler. He makes it very clear. He says he's the least of them all, but rather he's saying, I want to be able to boast in Jesus, in the fact that his life and those in the Philippian church, they were ones that served as an example of how to shine in the world, to shine as a light and share the gospel with a dark and broken world. That the spreading of the gospel is something that is worth pouring our lives out for, of straining and working with God as he works within us and resisting complaining. It's worth doing those things so the gospel can be spread. There was a man in the first century named Ignatius of Antioch. He was converted to Christianity, and he very quickly became a really loud and prominent voice in the church to encourage Christians at that time of let's stand firm in the faith amidst all this persecution. The first century Christians saw so much persecution from the culture. And when the Roman emperor told Christians, he basically said, choose apostasy, basically renounce your faith, or choose death. And Ignatius chooses death. And this is what he writes in his final letter. He says this, for I would not have you to be men pleasers, but to please God, as indeed you do please him. For neither shall I myself ever find an opportunity such as this when I'm being persecuted to attain unto God. Nor can you, if you're silent, such a noble deed. For if you keep silent and spare me, I'm a word of God. But if you crave for my flesh, I shall again be a mere voice. No, give me nothing more than that I may be poured out as a libation to God, while there is still an altar ready, that forming a choir in love, you may sing to the Father in Jesus Christ. And as his story would go, Ignatius would be thrown to lions and killed. But he counted it a joy to suffer because he knew that it was his worship unto God, to be a loud voice, a light in a world, not to shrink back in the shadows out of fear or shame, but to shine forth the light and the hope and the joy of the gospel. And Paul invites the Philippians church and us to view our lives in the same way, an opportunity to gladly and willingly pour ourselves out, to live differently, to live sacrificially, so that God can be worshiped in our lives and throughout the earth. And so not only do we worship God, but we witness to others as lights. Look back towards the end of verse 15, just the last six words or so. You shine as lights in the world. I want to take a moment to highlight something small but significant. It says you will shine as lights where? In the world. In the world. So where does Paul, or what does God call us to practice not grumbling so that we can be lights? It's in the world. Paul is saying to the Philippians that their placement as foreigners and aliens and outcasts in a culture that does not agree with them is the exact place that God has desired them to be, to place them to shine. Because lights shine in the darkest places, even when those dark places are lonely and they're dangerous and they're hard to be in. This dark world is where we hold on to, or we hold out. That's what some of the language is pointing to in this passage. We hold out like a bright torch in a dark room. The gospel of Jesus Christ, which is the word of life, it brings light into our dark world. It brings healing to our broken hearts. It brings life into our dead souls, and it offers us salvation through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And this is exactly what Jesus is talking about in John 17 when he says this. He's speaking to his disciples. He says, I've given them, this is a prayer that he has rather to God the Father about his disciples. He says, I've given them, my disciples, your word, and the world has hated them because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but that you keep them safe from the evil one. They do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. Set them apart in the truth. Your word is truth. Just as you sent me into the world, so I sent them into the world. And I set myself apart on their behalf so that they too may be truly set apart. So Jesus himself has set us apart and placed us specifically within the world, within Bryan College Station, so that we can be vessels in which the light of the world, Jesus, can shine forth. And working in college ministry, I have a privilege of seeing so many young people live out their faith boldly. And I work on a team where I have staff members who have family members who are not believers. And it is so encouraging to my heart, someone who does not experience that I have a lot of family who loves the Lord and walks with him dearly. But I have examples of people who, whenever I read their prayer cards that they share on Sunday mornings, or I sit with them in staff meetings before we go on break and say, hey, what's the one thing I can be praying for you? And I often think I'm going to hear we'll pray for rest and pray for travels and pray that I don't slip up into old sin struggles. And we get those prayer requests too, but I know so many students and people I work with who say, help me to have spiritual conversations with my family. Help me to seek opportunities, to live above reproach, to be different, to not give in to the ways of speaking and acting that they do. Help me to be different when I go home. Give me the desire, the ability to do those things. And so I'm blessed, and I'm sure there's examples of people in your life who their desire is to be placed in those difficult circumstances, to do difficult things so that the light of Christ will shine forth and they can be a witness to those who are around them. And here's some ways that I would encourage you guys to be witnesses is just to watch the words that you say, to be mindful like we've talked about. One way we can say it is that when we complain, we constrain the gospel. That when we gripe and we whine, we're not practicing the joy and the hope and the peace that we claim to have by the Spirit of God. And so when we complain, we constrain the gospel. Remember, Paul said the reason that we shouldn't complain is so that we can be lights in the culture. So we need to be mindful of what we say. So for you, I would think about the spheres of influence that you have in your life, the different people that you know, whether you work with them or work out with them or they're just your neighbors. Be mindful. Are there certain groups of people that you are more susceptible to complain around? And maybe just be aware of that. If you're going to go see those people, if you're going to go to work, if you're going to go hang out with those people, maybe just on the way there, pray, God, help me to not fall back into someone who grumbles and complains. And I would also encourage you to feed the good rather than finding a bridge and trying to relate with people by complaining or grumbling about things that they say or things that you can relate to. Instead, try to find a way to slip in a positive word. It doesn't have to seem fake or weird. It probably will seem weird because you're going against the grain. But I'll just encourage you, be mindful of the words that you speak and choose to speak words of life. And so I would encourage you, to think about where you might be annoyed with certain situations. Even though your situation maybe isn't looking bright, depending on where you're at, you make a decision to not complain, to not grumble, to look different, to not gripe to your friends or connect with strangers through complaining. And people will notice that you're a person marked by joy, and they'll come to you and they'll ask, what's different when things are hard, when they stink at work? You have joy and hope. You don't complain about our boss or about your roommates. What's the secret? And that's a great opportunity to hold forth the torch, the light of the gospel, and explain to them, this is the reason for the hope that I have, the joy that I have. And one last thing that I'll say that hopefully it's a memorable way for you to have this in your mind, and it's this: don't whine and you'll shine. I know it's corny, it's silly, but maybe that's a thing that you can write. I mean, I'm notorious for carrying around 3x5 note cards in my pocket. And when we talked about this in our college ministry, I wrote this down in my pocket. And every time I pulled it out, it was just a reminder of, I don't want to be a person who complains, that I want to be a light who shines forth in the world. And so 2 questions to leave you with. What is one area in your life where it's easy to complain? One specific area. We talked about it earlier. Maybe it's a place. Maybe it's certain people you're around. But maybe how can you work to be self-aware of where you tend to shine not so bright? What's one area where it's easy to complain? And second, who is one person in your life who can hold you accountable? So you're being self-aware of there's certain places I'm going where it's hard to not complain, but who's one person, a trusted person who knows me, but I know who will be truthful, that can speak into my life, that I can go to, and they can correct me if needed. And so as you sit down, you begin to refine and finalize all your goals for this next year, including the great things that you want to do with God, I'd love for you to consider how seemingly small but significant choosing to not complain can be, and how different not only you, but our church and our city could look if we did that thing. Let's pray together. God, thank you that we can gather and worship you through song and prayer and through your word. God, thank you that we get to open it together. That I know for many of us at the busy holiday season, this might have been the first time that we've opened up the Bible in weeks, or maybe a long time, or maybe ever, God. And we just say thank you. Thank you that it is truth. And thank you that it calls us to do hard things, but it also doesn't leave us to do it alone, God, that you do call us to look different from the world and to not complain and to resist the temptation to fit in. But also you've given us your spirit to work powerfully within us, to give us the desire and the ability, God. And so I pray that even today, I pray that we'd have conversations over brunch or with our friends or with our spouses, God, about ways that we can look different and how we don't have to do these large, grand gestures that take a whole year to do, God, that we can simply start by choosing to not be a person who complains, that we see the good and we practice gratitude in our life, God. So I pray that our church would be a bright, shining light in this community because of the words that we speak, life-giving words to one another, God. And so, God, may the words of our mouth and even the meditations of our heart be pleasing in your sight. We pray this in your name, Jesus, by the power of your Spirit. Amen.